Hey everyone, welcome to the Retail Redefined podcast, a podcast that is all about retail, design, and the future of it. And I'm your host, Chriselle. Today we are having our Senior Interior Design Manager, Alex Kuby, on the show. He has joined the firm fairly recently, at the tail end of 2018, but he has already been such a great asset, and he is also part of our interior design studio. So because of his background in hospitality and him also being a millennial such as myself, I thought it would be great to talk to him about designing for the self-care generation. You have probably seen in the last couple of years that there has definitely been a rise in people very intentionally taking care of themselves, not just with their physical well-being, but also with their mental and emotional well-being. And that also affects, the kinds of spaces that we go into and the kinds of spaces that we want to be in. And so I wanted to kind of talk to Alex a little bit about how, as designers, how they come up and create that scene for people to come in and relax and take care of themselves. So I hope you enjoy today's episode. Hey, Alex, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me. This is really exciting. I love that this architecture firm has a podcast that's really unique.
Yeah, I thought it would be a great way to talk more about, design in a more casual setting, and kind of getting the chance to pick people's brains in the office, and getting to hear what they're thinking about and how they view the world, how they design. So, yeah.
Well, I'm always happy to explore thoughts with people. So,
yeah. So, again, thanks so much for being on the show. I'm really excited to talk about today's topic because I would consider myself to be part of this. And we're talking about self-care, but in the context of designing. And, you are part of our interiors team and your background is hospitality. So I'm sure you've probably seen how this rise in self-care has impacted the way that we design some of these spaces that we're in.
Absolutely. No, I would say it's not necessarily a new concept, talking about self-care and wellness specifically. In the context of architecture, I think, when you're studying in school, there are lots of theoretical papers that you read all the way from kind of, 2,000 years ago. Vitruvius even outlines this kind of well-being and happiness in the kind of three kind of main points of a good building. And what's really great about kind of the current trend is that it's getting a lot of publicity. And what we're seeing is very similar to the LEED movement with sustainability. This is putting pressure on manufacturers and developers and operators and everybody that's kind of within the development community to address these really important topics. And that's just really refreshing from a design standpoint where it's important to us. So
yeah, I get what you're saying when you say this isn't new, we're talking about wellness and stuff, and then self-care itself, I think, manifests itself because people are kind of talking about prioritizing themselves first and making sure that, and it's more than just the physical body. And we kind of talked about this when we discussed this briefly before, but that idea of taking care of your mental health as well. And we're starting to kind of see the ways that people are trying to address that, how here in this office we have the wellness room, and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously we do a lot of workplace projects. And being in this new office that we have here is really great in terms of just experiencing what we're creating for other clients as well. A lot of these offerings are programmatic, but there's a fair amount of design that goes into facilitating these activities and providing an environment that's conducive to just a general positive state and better mental health.
Yeah.
So you feel that within the community of spaces that have that attention. And what I really enjoy is that it weaves itself so naturally into the type of work we do.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's specific to architecture and design as a type of work, but I think all types of work can kind of play into the wellness and kind of the positive mental impact of great space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when you and I were kind of talking about what we would talk about for this episode before, when we were talking about like, you know, caring for mental health through amenities in whatever space, you know, could be like an office, could be a hotel or anything. How do you think designers could be mindful of that?
Yeah, I think so. The industry is starting to resolve around these 5 concepts, these 5 principles. At a high level, they're connecting, keeping active, taking notice, continue learning, and giving back. Those are kind of the high level efforts that really play into a positive mental state. And what we do as designers is we try to find ways to facilitate within the experience of these buildings those elements, those categories. So, for example, something as simple as programmatic relationships. I have a lot of experience in hospitality, so a simple example of that is distributing amenity spaces across multiple floors, encouraging with a feature staircase, the use of the stairs, getting people moving, making the circulation between spaces more exciting and engaging. Similarly, you know, I think you'll find a theme in circulation because not only are you moving, but there's kind of a parallel to your experiential sequencing through the space that comes along the circulation of these buildings. And you can also kind of play into the take notice point. So with that, you can provide through art or views through windows or just, you know, benches to sit down where you can really interrupt the monotony of, you know, your daily experience to kind of sit or stop and observe. And efforts like that play a huge role in bringing people more into the present moment. And, you know, there's a huge increase in meditation and mindfulness that kind of plays off of the same principles of pulling yourself out of the anxiety of the future, the depression of the past, and into the present moment where you can kind of be centered. And so by providing these moments of kind of breaking that monotony or that pace, where you can kind of really be present and enjoy a piece of art or experience a unique view. Those are tools that we have that can kind of play into what would otherwise be kind of a lesser circulation-based program.
So even something as simple as just a piece of art can be very intentional in, you know.
Certainly. I mean, you craft... So you're basically creating a scene. You know, the art may be the feature, but how you arrive upon it, how you kind of experience it within the context of where you're going or what you're doing. Elevator lobbies are a great place for this because people have to stop and wait.
Yeah.
Interior elevator cabs as well. You're kind of in a more intimate and closed environment. So those are really high touch points where we can justify spending a bit more money commissioning artwork or elevating the quality of the materials and design in those spaces to really slow down the pace of people and get them, you know, experiencing their environment off of their phone and just kind of being for a moment. Yeah.
So, okay, so we're kind of talking about like some of the tools you guys use to design, and like you're talking mostly communal hotel spaces. And what about when you go into a hotel room? You know, what can, like, when you think of what would be, I know a lot of times hotel rooms nowadays are kind of just a place to sleep, especially if you're traveling and whatnot. But, you know, I do also believe that when people travel, they do like to indulge a little bit more.
Sure.
And so what paint us a picture of what your perfect like hotel room would look like and how, I don't know, how you would care for yourself in that space, or how that would care for you.
So that is a tall order, the perfect hotel room. I think, well, so there are lots of different criteria depending on the context, the brand, the project. But I think in the context of self-care and wellness, certainly you want to make sure that there's adequate natural lighting.
Yeah.
You want attention to materiality. You want high touch points to have a really nice tactile feedback, and the attention to detail. This being a smaller, more intimate space, those things are very much appreciated, and also kind of give you the opportunity to stop, slow down, and again, be in the moment. Sleeping is obviously a huge component of a guest room experience. So, comfortable linens, the really high-end beds, things that allow you to control the light qualities, whether you can have natural light filter in the morning when you wake up to kind of start your circadian rhythm, or blackout curtains to kind of control your quality of sleep during the night. Those all are very important. When it comes to maybe the restroom, oversized bathtubs are great.
Yes,
mostly
they are.
Mostly because I'm a larger person and I appreciate being able to fit in the bathtub. So that's something I always look forward to when I visit hotels, and try to include in projects that we can offer that service. You're seeing a lot of partnerships with high-end products. You're also seeing a lot of attention to higher end materials in the restrooms themselves. I think natural stones in the wet areas and more wood tones in the guest areas. There's a lot of relationships that kind of derive out of material rooted from natural sources, kind of being soothing and positive towards mental well-being. And then, of course, views. If you have them, you're kind of stuck with where your property is.
Yeah.
But anything you can do to kind of draw a connection to the context of the room, it's always positive to understand your position within a larger context.
Well, the views. I mean, yeah, you said that you're kind of stuck with the location. So how would you design a space in which the views are not that great?
Good drapery.
Okay.
No, I think so. You have all kinds of other tools interior to the room as well. Again, your art program can be a huge tool if you have the budget to really play into that. You can do wall graphics. You can do more curated pieces. Again, you're really trying to tie into the brand and the specific project's design narrative while you are kind of pursuing art. But that's something that can kind of take your focus away from a bad view, using shears so you can still get natural light in, but not necessarily looking at the back of a parking lot or whatever your non-optimal view is.
Yeah.
And you can also, if you don't have the opportunity of great natural light, you can also start to, with the newer lighting systems, you can start to mimic natural lighting. You're seeing that a lot actually in aircraft design. They're using lighting as an opportunity to kind of transition you between time zones, encourage you to rest, and then kind of start to wake
ease the
up.
jet lag.
Yeah, they're manipulating your circadian rhythm a little bit with lighting tones. To kind of help you feel more refreshed and experience less jet lag when you arrive.
Oh.
So.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, in those industries, they're all related. The same lighting designers and manufacturers are working across hospitality and other architectural built as well.
Oh, okay. Well, that's something that I'm definitely going to keep in mind the next time I fly. Okay, so yeah, that sounds like. I mean, it all sounds like really, really good, and I think something that you and I were also talking about was how, like, before we just started recording, I asked you, "Oh, are you millennial?" And I only ask that because, when people talk about the self-care generation, they're thinking a lot about millennials and Gen Z. I think more so millennials because we are all millennials are like full-grown adults, whereas
with money to spend.
Yes, whereas Gen Z is still, yes, like the older end, they are adults, but like most of them are still like in in high school. They're on the younger end, so they're definitely not at that age where they're going to be traveling to hotels by themselves. But what are ways? So one key thing that I've noticed, with our generation is, wanting to have these luxurious experiences, but not spending the money, because there's a lot of factors that play into that. But, people are wanting to have these luxurious hotel experiences without having to pay the money to stay in like a 5-star hotel. And I guess my question to you is, have you seen any brands that are kind of trying to offer this sort of experience?
Yeah, I would say every brand is trying to offer this kind of experience. There's been this huge explosion of just new kind of boutique flags coming out of these large operators. You're seeing, and I think that's probably why the boutique hotel, I'm sticking to hotel design now, has been so explosive in the past 10 years, is just there's your opportunity to, at a lower cost, provide a higher quality experience. And it also gives you a little bit more diversity in your offerings. You have these hotels that are really positioning their sub-brands to focus on health and well-being. They're at a high level. Some of these operators do a really good job. I would call out Hyatt, IHG, those two that I've worked with that have definitely made a priority to focus on wellness, not just guest facing, but also for their employees. Back of house spaces being well designed as well, instead of being leftover spaces. So I think that contributes to a positive perspective from the staff that can then also apply to the guest experience. Kind of a pay it forward type of mentality.
If the staff are feeling great, then that's going to translate in their service.
Right. But to get back to your kind of original question, the other solution that these boutique brands offer is that they can be in different locations. And I think that the cost of a city has a lot to do with the price of overall travel. And so by kind of opening up smaller boutique locations that aren't necessarily in the heart of downtown Los Angeles or Chicago or New York or just San Francisco, exploring this kind of still really culturally rich but less main travel destination locations, is opening up lower cost travel experiences that can be higher end.
So when you say like not being right in the center of a city, so we'll use LA for example, just because we're based just out of LA and it's just easy to talk in terms of context. So do you mean like someone opening a smaller boutique hotel like just outside of downtown, or do you mean even farther out, like to a place like Long Beach where it's still a place where people can travel to and still have like a fulfilling experience, I guess, so to speak, and it's kind of in between like Orange County and LA? Or do you like, I don't know what's the range,
I guess both would be the answer.
Okay.
So but Long Beach is a better example because I think it represents more cities, both domestically and abroad, that are still immersed in kind of the geographic culture, but are a little bit more coming of age, since there's been a lot of focus on these huge hubs, and they've been just explosively growing, and with that comes the cost. And of course, you have fantastic museums and all these destinations, but what's happening is you're getting this kind of second circle of still culturally immersive experiences, but at lower land cost rates. And also with the advantage of developing after these primary hubs, they've been able to apply a lot of lessons learned and actually in a lot of ways end up developing in a way that's a better kind of pedestrian experience, which has been really important to the success of a lot of hotels is the context that they're within, being more pedestrian friendly, being better access to restaurants and just communal life, local life, which is a little bit harder in the megacities.
Yeah, so more integration with the local.
Yeah, an application of, the design philosophies that have evolved over time and through understanding of what works.
Yeah. Okay. That sounds good. So we're going to shift just a tiny bit, and I know you said that you hate this phrase, but tell me about Instagram moments and how you feel about them, because, I mean, let's face it, social media does also play a big role in why some people will choose certain places, or whether that is because they want to take a picture in a certain space, or they see it on someone else's social media, and that it's pretty much the new word of mouth, so to speak. And
okay.
Yeah, talk to me about that.
Hate is such a strong word, but I do kind of recoil at the concept of the Instagram moment. And I think that's because it's become super focused on a specific element at a location that is a marketing tool.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I understand that there's a lot of value to identifying an image or a location and, the organic spread in terms of marketing for a property. I appreciate that as a strategy. However, in this context of wellness and self-care, I really think that we want to be less about encouraging people to pull out their phones and more about encouraging them to really just experience and enjoy where they are and what they're doing. And what I would say is that if you have a feature wall that's specifically tailored for a photo, then that is what people are going to do. They're going to go stand by that wall and take a photo and share it on Instagram. And what you've done is you've removed any of the discovery and exploration experience out of the space. As the second they come through the front door, if there's a feature element in the lobby that's designed to take a photo of, they go right towards that, they take their photo, and then they're on their phone sharing it and looking at their likes. And what I think promotes a better and more healthy experience is really immersing them in that sense of arrival, having them kind of take in the various scenes that have been kind of created throughout the space, sequencing through the space, understanding it, really kind of discovering and arriving upon nuances that are interesting, and then in perspective appreciating it such that they'll be inspired to then maybe take a photo. But that process of kind of giving ownership to the understanding of the space and the discovery of it is something that, again, brings you more into the moment. Yeah. And I think generally promotes that sense of well-being that we were talking about earlier in the podcast. Yeah. So I'd like to find a way to kind of bring the marketing element, the positive effects of being, organically sharing the space, but without doing it so abruptly by hitting people over the head. Okay. So I think, like a lot of things, there are a lot of good ideas that, if done just with a little bit more nuance and by weaving it into the identity of the space and the quality of the experience, just elevate their value and enhance the quality of enjoying them.
It's like you were saying before, you had said, when we previously talked about this, you said that you would prefer if like a space can be so, like the flow is so natural and it goes so great that no matter what angle you're at, if you do decide to take a photo, that it's going to look good, not just, this one feature element.
Yes. It's immersive. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the great aspects of what we do is it's an immersive experience. And there shouldn't just be one vantage point that is considered. It should be, your experience throughout, whether you're sitting in a lobby of the hotel, waiting for someone, an Uber or someone to pick you up. I mean, I think every positioning of furniture, every kind of consideration of material and layering of, whether it's screens or art pieces or how the desks are aligned, you're crafting from all different angles, a different understanding of the underlying design narrative that you're trying to tell. And I think when people arrive upon that through their own experience rather than kind of it being forced on them, it has a lot more impact and is a lot more memorable.
Yeah. And I know that people joke and say like, oh, well, if you don't have photos, then it didn't happen. But I think kind of going back to the whole self-care thing, the people talk now about, kind of being off of your phone as a form of self-care. So I think you bring up a good point when you say you want to create an experience where the first thing people are thinking about is, exploring the space rather than let me pull out my phone, because it would be better for, I guess, the self-care aspect if you're not focusing on like how many people are liking your stuff, but rather just kind of like really taking in the whole experience as it is.
Yeah, I mean, we put a lot of effort into storytelling through space. We have this great suite of architectural vocabulary that we really rigorously select how we play with, elements of boundary and scale and relationship and sequencing, and there's just a lot that goes into that. It's kind of like if you write a narrative, if you write a book and people just take a picture of the cover and then post it on Instagram and never read it.
I bet some people do that.
Yeah.
That blows my mind, actually. So what about the blurring of the lines between the guest and public space? I know you have mentioned that before, and I'm just curious to hear, because it's something that I have not personally seen in the hospitality space, but it is happening.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I think if you look back to the 80s and 90s, a lot of architecture in general, there were very heavy boundaries. And a lot of that had to do, I think, with the safety of big cities. I think that there was, a sense of security by having, big, heavy walls and all of these boundaries really solidly defined. And what you've seen over the years since is a dissolving of that. And a lot of progressive hotels really open their doors to their community. And I think communal involvement is a two-way street. It's great that the restaurants and services offered by the hotel can be enjoyed by the local community. It also allows the guests who are visiting that city the opportunity to interact with the local community a little bit more, and then kind of go out and experience, the local lifestyle as well.
Yeah.
So really blurring that threshold is great, but all of these boundaries kind of lie on a continuum, and you really have to be mindful of the context and, again, the brand identity and the specific requirements of each project to understand where on that continuum of opaque versus transparent you want that boundary condition to lie.
Yeah. Because, I've only really, heard of this kind of blurring the guest and public space with, hostels. But it sounds like more and more higher end hotels are starting to incorporate that. So
I think there are obviously still going to be guest space only.
Yes, of course,
your room is your room.
Of course.
They're not letting people in. There's not a cafe in there that people can go to. But the amenities are really where you're getting a lot of mixing, and even within lobbies you're seeing a lot of program with kind of these communal tables where they have these offerings. One of the other qualities of wellness that I mentioned before is to keep learning. So you're seeing several brands start to embrace having classes that happen right in their lobbies at this kind of offerings table, and people from the community can come and attend, guests that are there can come and attend. It's this really interesting activity where they may have, a chef come in and teach you how to make something, or they may have an artist come in and teach you how to draw something, or a musician come in. And it's really about filling up these spaces with culturally rich program.
Yeah.
And being able to share that experience.
It sounds like like hotel and hospitality brands are definitely not doing that whole hands-off approach, like, okay, you're here and like that's it, like enjoy your stay, if you need anything we'll be right here. But like I'm like, I don't know if you can hear that, but anyway, like that idea that once you check in, yeah, the staff is there if you need it, but that's it. And then but it sounds like with the programming and everything, they're trying to like really help you, I guess, integrate into the culture.
Yeah,
so to speak.
So definitely for hospitality, there's going to be a continuum again with that. Certain brands are much more focused on a private kind of very luxurious high-end experience where you want to relax and get away. And those, you see those a lot in resort properties and, these areas that you're not going to this location because of the rich cultural, context. You're going because there's a really nice beach. But most of the urban hotels and areas that kind of relate to their context a lot more are definitely pushing that, because they know that's why people are there. They're there to explore the city. They're there to experience what it is that makes that location interesting and special, and they want to provide that. But what's also interesting is that this isn't specific to hotels. What has been amazing about the field of architecture is how all of these typologies, which had kind of previously segregated, are starting to share lessons learned. And especially when you're talking about issues that are relative to the human condition, which obviously transcends every architectural endeavor, you're seeing a real plethora of research and just understanding start to spread. So, for example, that's a little vague, but so for example, a lot of studies for educational facilities are starting to play into workplace and vice versa. And retail obviously is everywhere. I mean, everything is retail. It's in our name. That's for a reason. And what we're seeing, for an example, is the qualities of spaces that have been studied for education purposes, like what different color theory applies to mental states, what different ceiling heights or compression or voluminous spaces, how do they affect the way that you interact and think. And so by understanding that voluminous spaces and kind of bluer tones have an impact on more creative thinking, that was derived from studies done in educational spaces, but that really does apply to workplace. And it also applies to these amenity programs that are starting to find their way into hospitality projects. If you're going to commit to mental well-being and you want to provide an opportunity for continued learning as part of that wellness program, then you want to make sure that you're providing spaces that facilitate that type of learning. And inversely, red tones and more compressed ceiling heights and those things really promote focus. So those type of, just all these lessons learned, not necessarily set a prescription for how spaces is defined, but definitely can influence. And there's a lot of value to being subtle with that knowledge.
Yeah. I mean, this is something that I've said on previous episodes, but I think it really comes down to designing for context and intention. I mean, obviously, I myself am not a designer, so I don't know, but it just sounds like we're definitely trying to be more mindful and intentional with not just in hospitality, but just in every typology, really trying to make sure that we're being purposeful in everything, not just, okay, well, let's just design something just so we can say that we did it.
Yeah. Well, I think, so designing for content or context is, you hit the nail on the head. That's what we do for every project. And I think the new publicly visible state that has kind of been known by designers for a long time is that context is necessarily inclusive of what happens within people's heads. It's not just the context of the project, it's the context of a state of mind and how we engage the world. I mean, that's how we understand everything. It's all through our senses, it's all through our experiences, and by building relationships between new experiences and past experiences. That's how we understand things, it's how we interact. And so we need to be very mindful of including that in how we craft these spaces.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds good. I mean, I've learned a lot. And I like and appreciate how you kind of gave some specific design cues that you guys are talking about, like how you're talking about the ceiling height and like some of the specific colors and things like that. I mean, and I know that all ties into like psychology, but then like how do we integrate that into this? So I think that's very interesting. But anyway.
Yeah, well, that's my main issue with most articles and kind of content right now is that there's a lack of substance. So it's good to give examples and just to help illustrate the ideas that you're trying to. It's a little bit more
concrete than just saying, "Oh yeah, we
can do this."
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. Mm-hmm. But anyway, thank you so much for being on the show. This was really great.
Of course, I really enjoyed the conversation, and I'm happy to come back and talk about anything else.
I enjoyed it too. Thank you.
Great.
And that's all we have for this week's episode. Thank you so much, Alex, for being on the show. And thank you all for listening. I hope you were able to take something away from this episode. And until next week, see you soon.